The small-town diner smelled of stale coffee and worn vinyl booths, a scent as familiar to Arthur as the worn leather of his favorite armchair. He sat by the window, a quiet presence in the morning light, observing the gentle rhythm of Elm Creek. The town wasn't much, not anymore. Just a place where time seemed to slow, offering a kind of peace he hadn't known for many years. He wore simple clothes, nondescript, easily overlooked. That was the point. He was just an old man now, retired, living out his days in a place where nobody asked questions. His hands, though gnarled with age, rested steady on the formica table, a faint tracery of old scars hidden beneath the skin. He sipped his coffee, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams, the picture of quiet contentment. Elm Creek wasn't perfect, though. Like a slow-growing sickness, trouble had found its way in. A biker gang, calling themselves the Steel Vultures, had started roosting in the abandoned mill on the edge of town. They were loud, crude, and their presence felt like a stain on the simple peace Arthur cherished. Petty crime had risen, intimidation was becoming common, and a shadow of fear was creeping over the faces of the townsfolk. For the most part, the vultures stuck to the bars and the outer roads, but their influence, like the rumble of their engines, was starting to permeate everything. Arthur had seen their type before. Wolves in cheap leather, preying on the weak. He just hadn't expected them to arrive here. He was finishing his second cup when they walked in. 3 of them, leather-clad, smelling of stale smoke and arrogance. The lead biker, a hulking man with a shaven head and a thick, scarred neck, wore a cut-off vest with the vulture's patch prominently displayed. He scanned the diner, his eyes settling on the few patrons, a nervous waitress, an elderly couple, and Arthur. A cruel smile split his face as he lumbered towards Arthur's booth, his boots heavy on the linoleum floor. The other 2 fanned out slightly, blocking the aisle, their eyes lingering on the waitress. "Well, well, look what we got here," the big one sneered, stopping directly beside Arthur's table. His voice was a low growl, meant to intimidate. "Taking up valuable real estate, old-timer." Arthur slowly set his mug down. He met the man's eyes, his own gaze calm and steady, entirely lacking the fear the biker expected. "I'm just having my coffee," Arthur said, his voice quiet but clear. "Just having your coffee," the biker mocked, turning to his companions with a laugh. "Hear that, boys? The old man's having coffee. Don't want to disturb his important morning." He leaned down, getting uncomfortably close. "This is our town now, Pops. We decide who sits where." He slammed a fist onto the table, making the coffee jump in the mug. "Maybe you should move along before you spill that." The waitress gasped nervously from behind the counter. The elderly couple pretended not to notice, their faces pale. Arthur remained still. He looked at the fist on his table for a moment, then back up at the biker. His eyes held a depth that the man couldn't understand, a quiet assessment that wasn't defiance, but something far colder. "I paid for my coffee and my seat," Arthur said softly. "I won't be moving." Hammer, for that was the leader's name, as Arthur later learned, blinked, surprised by the lack of capitulation. His cruel smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You got a mouth on you for a fossil, don't you?" He reached out, gripping Arthur's shoulder hard, his intention clear, to bodily haul him out of the booth. "Time for you to learn some manners." It happened faster than the eye could follow. One moment, Hammer's hand was on Arthur's shoulder, the next, Hammer was on the floor, face down in spilled coffee, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle behind his back. Arthur was standing, his movement fluid and precise, his eyes sharp. One of the other bikers lunged forward, reaching for a weapon tucked into his belt. Arthur didn't hesitate. A quick, almost imperceptible movement, a blur of motion, and the biker cried out, stumbling back, clutching his wrist. The weapon clattered uselessly on the floor. The third biker froze, his eyes wide with shock. Arthur didn't look at him. He simply held Hammer in place, his grip firm, his breathing even. The stillness that had defined him moments ago was gone, replaced by an aura of controlled danger. The quiet old man had vanished, and something else entirely stood in his place. Hammer roared in pain and surprise. "What the hell?" he choked out, trying to struggle. Arthur's voice was calm, quiet, and carried absolute authority. "Get out," he said. It wasn't a request. The third biker, seeing his companions incapacitated, swallowed hard. He helped the one with the injured wrist stumble out. Hammer, still pinned, glared up at Arthur, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. "You old fool," he snarled. "You just made the biggest mistake of your miserable life. Nobody does this to me. Nobody." Arthur released the twisted arm, and Hammer scrambled awkwardly to his feet, clutching his shoulder. "Get out," Arthur repeated, his gaze unwavering. "And don't come back." Hammer backed away, rubbing his shoulder, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think this is over?" he spat, gesturing wildly. "You think you can just do this and walk away? We're the Steel Vultures. We own this town. You're dead, old man. You hear me? Dead." He turned and limped out of the diner, followed by his limping associate, leaving the third biker to nervously eye Arthur before hurrying after his leader. A stunned silence filled the diner. The waitress stared, her mouth agape. The elderly couple slowly lowered their hands from where they had instinctively raised them. Arthur calmly picked up his fallen coffee mug, found it intact, and returned to his booth. He sat down as if nothing extraordinary had happened, retrieving a napkin to wipe the spilled coffee from the table. The aura of danger receded, leaving only the quiet old man again. But the silence in the diner was different now. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the presence of awe. Arthur knew Hammer's threats were not idle. He had crossed them publicly, humiliated their leader. The Steel Vultures would retaliate, and it wouldn't be a simple bar fight. This was just the beginning. He finished cleaning the table, his mind already working, assessing the situation, the environment, the likely next steps. Decades of training and experience, long dormant, were stirring. The peace he sought was about to be shattered, and he was the one who had initiated it. He looked out the window again, but he wasn't seeing dust motes anymore. He was seeing lines of engagement, potential threats, and the faces of people who now looked at him with unexpected hope. He sighed, a quiet sound lost in the sudden murmur of the diner. Retirement was officially over. Tell us, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments section below. Arthur didn't wait for the inevitable retaliation. He started by watching, observing. He spent the next few days moving through Elm Creek, not just sitting at the diner, but walking the streets, visiting the few struggling businesses, lingering near the mill. He noticed things others didn't, patterns in the Vultures' patrols, the cars that visited the mill late at night, the nervous glances of certain townsfolk when the bikers were mentioned. His eyes, trained to spot anomalies in chaotic environments, saw the subtle signs of a more organized operation than simple territorial bullying. He talked to people, too, quietly at first. The diner owner, a woman named Martha, whose son had been bullied by the Vultures. The owner of the hardware store, whose inventory had been taxed by the gang. The gas station attendant, a young man named Billy, who nervously talked about seeing men in suits visiting the mill, not just bikers. Billy had a quiet intensity about him, and a faded Marine sticker on his toolbox. Arthur made a mental note. The Vultures, meanwhile, were making their displeasure known. They didn't immediately attack Arthur, perhaps debating how to handle the embarrassing public defeat of their leader. Instead, they tightened their grip on the town. More visible patrols, more aggressive shakedowns, vandalizing businesses that hadn't paid their protection money. They wanted to reassert their dominance, to show the town that Arthur was a fluke, and resistance was futile. Billy at the gas station was shaking as he filled Arthur's tank one afternoon. They roughed up Mr. Henderson down the street, he muttered, glancing nervously towards the road. Smashed his store window. Said it was a message for anyone thinking they're tough. Arthur's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. Did he go to the sheriff? Billy scoffed softly. Sheriff Hayes? He don't do nothing. Says his hands are tied. Some folks say he's on their payroll. Corruption. That complicated things. Arthur thanked Billy and drove slowly away, his mind piecing together the fragmented information. The suits Billy saw, the increased organization, the seemingly protected status from local law enforcement. The Steel Vultures weren't just a local gang, they were connected. Likely involved in something bigger than petty extortion, probably drugs or worse, using Elm Creek as a quiet hub. This wasn't a simple problem that could be solved with a few well-placed joint locks. He needed help. He thought about Billy, the young Marine vet. He thought about Martha and her fear for her son. There were others too, people tired of living in fear. He needed allies, people with courage, maybe even some with useful skills. People who had something to lose, and everything to gain from fighting back. The quiet life had been a luxury. Duty called again, this time not for a flag or country, but for a small town choking under a biker gang's boot. Arthur began to reach out, quietly. He sought out Billy at the gas station, away from prying eyes. Billy, he said, that Marine sticker on your toolbox. You serve? Billy looked surprised, then nodded, straightening slightly. Yes, sir. For years. Corpsman. Good man, Arthur nodded. See a lot of rough stuff. Billy's expression hardened. Enough, sir. You see what these vultures are doing to this town? Yes, sir. Makes my blood boil. Mine too, Arthur said simply. He paused, measuring his words. They're not going to stop on their own. And the local law seems ineffective. Billy looked down, scuffing a boot. It's bad, mister. Arthur. Just Arthur, he held Billy's gaze. I need people I can trust. People who understand what's at stake. People who know how to handle themselves when things get difficult. Billy met his eyes again, a spark of something lighting in them. You planning something, sir? We are, Arthur corrected gently. He explained his assessment of the situation, the potential for deeper criminal activity, the need for a coordinated effort. He didn't reveal his own background explicitly, not yet, but his calm authority and strategic thinking were evident. Billy listened intently, the nervousness replaced by focused attention. Billy was the first. He knew others, a couple of Army vets who worked construction, a former Air Force comms specialist running the small electronics repair shop. Slowly, cautiously, a small group began to form. They met in the back room of the diner after closing, or late at night in Billy's garage. They were civilians now, but the discipline, the training, the code of service was still there, buried just beneath the surface. Arthur didn't need to bark orders, his quiet suggestions, his clear logic, were enough. He became the undeniable leader, not by force of personality, but by quiet competence. Meanwhile, the Steel Vultures grew bolder. Hammer's humiliation festered. He didn't just want revenge, he wanted to crush any glimmer of resistance. More vultures arrived from neighboring chapters, beefing up their numbers. They started stopping cars on the road, shaking down travelers. The fear in Elm Creek was palpable. The situation was escalating rapidly, exactly as Arthur had anticipated. The vultures weren't just a nuisance anymore, they were becoming an occupying force. They were making a major move, consolidating power, expanding their territory and operations. This reinforced the Allies' determination, they knew they couldn't wait any longer. The time for passive resistance was over. They're pushing harder, Billy reported at one of their late-night meetings in the garage. Saw a truck loaded with supplies pull into the mill last night. Heavy security. Arthur studied a rough map of the town and the mill grounds spread out on a workbench. Supplies, he murmured. Consistent visits from out-of-towners, the volume of traffic, the sudden influx of manpower. It confirms my suspicion. This isn't just protection rackets. They're running something significant out of that mill. Drugs, maybe weapons. It's drawing attention from higher up the chain. That's why Hayes is keeping his distance, someone important is leaning on him. An older man, Frank, a grizzled army mechanic, pointed to a section of the map. Mill's got old tunnels, connects to the riverbank. Used for shipping back in the day. Probably how they move stuff in and out without using the main road. Arthur nodded. Valuable intelligence. He traced potential routes on the map. Okay. Here's the plan. We can't take them head on. Not enough numbers, and they've got heavy weapons now. We use what we have. Speed, surprise, local knowledge, and working as a team. Just like we were trained, he looked around the small group, Billy, Frank, the comms specialist Sarah, Martha's younger brother Tom who knew the town like the back of his hand. Ordinary people, some with extraordinary pasts. Our objective isn't a pitched battle. It's disruption, cutting them off, making this town too hot to hold on to. And drawing out the head of the snake. He outlined a series of coordinated actions, disrupting their supply lines using the old river tunnels, hitting their secondary stashes in town, jamming their communications, creating distractions. We chip away at their foundation, Arthur explained. Make them vulnerable, expose their operation to outside eyes, and force Hammer to overreach. The plan was audacious, leveraging their small numbers and intimate knowledge of the local terrain and the vulture's habits. It wasn't about brute force, it was about precision and psychological warfare. As Arthur spoke, detailing tactics and contingencies, the transformation in him was complete. The quiet, unassuming old man was gone. In his place was a leader, a strategist, his eyes sharp, his mind calculating. The allies saw it and felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just an old man fighting, this was a veteran warrior, reactivated, leading them. This isn't going to be easy, Arthur said, his voice firm. They'll hit back hard. They'll try to scare the town into giving us up. People might get hurt, he looked at each of them. Anyone who wants out, now's the time. There's no shame in it. Silence met his words. Billy, Frank, Sarah, Tom, they all met his gaze with grim determination. We're with you, Arthur, Billy said, speaking for them all. Someone's gotta stand up. Arthur gave a rare, small smile. Then let's get to work. The resolve in the small garage was palpable. They were committed. They were ready. The fight for Elm Creek was about to begin in earnest. If you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The plan went into motion under the cloak of darkness. Billy and Frank, using Frank's mechanical skills and Billy's knowledge of the riverbank, navigated a small boat into the old mill tunnels, planting tracking devices and disrupting a hidden cache of weapons. Sarah, from a remote location, used modified equipment to briefly jam the vulture's radios, causing chaos during a planned movement. Tom and others created calculated distractions across town, pulling small groups of bikers away from key locations. It wasn't open combat, but surgical strikes. Annoying, disruptive, and effective. They hit the vultures where they were vulnerable, their logistics, their communication, their sense of security. Arthur coordinated everything, a quiet voice on a secure radio, guiding his small team with calm precision. The steel vultures reacted with predictable fury. Hammer was incandescent. His men were spooked, their confidence shaken. They didn't know who was hitting them or from where. Was it a rival gang? The feds? The bold man couldn't possibly be this organized. Their paranoia grew, leading to mistakes. They ramped up the intimidation. They vandalized more businesses, including Martha's Diner, smashing windows and spray-painting threats. They beat up a few teenagers they suspected of talking to Arthur's group. They wanted to terrorize the town into submission, to force the hidden resistance into the open. The townspeople were terrified, but something had shifted. The sight of Arthur standing up to Hammer, the quiet rumors of a resistance forming, had planted a seed of courage. When Martha's windows were smashed, neighbors came out, not just to gawk, but to help clean up. Someone started a small collection for the damaged businesses. Small acts of defiance and solidarity began to appear, doors locked when bikers passed, hushed conversations stopping abruptly, but eyes holding a new, hard edge. Arthur and his allies watched the town's response. It wasn't organized, not like their operations, but it was powerful. It was resilience. "They're scared," Sarah said over the radio, watching a group of bikers trying to intimidate a shopkeeper who refused to give them free goods. "But they're not breaking." Arthur nodded, unseen. "Good. Hammer needs to see that. He needs to feel the ground shifting under him." The vultures, frustrated by the unseen enemy and the town's unexpected stubbornness, decided on a show of force. They planned a large, public display of power, a ride through the main street, stopping to vandalize property and rough up anyone who dared look at them wrong. It was meant to re-establish fear. Arthur saw his opportunity. Hammer was overconfident, predictable in his brutality. He would bring his main force out into the open, away from the relative security of the mill. This was the lure. Arthur didn't have the numbers for a direct fight on the main street. But he had the terrain, local knowledge, and a team trained to use them. He and his allies set their own traps, prepared ambush points, not to kill, but to disable and disorient. Old service tunnels under the street, forgotten alleyways, reinforced buildings, they became their advantages. Arthur sent a message, a calculated leak designed to get back to Hammer. A false trail about a hidden stash of weapons the resistance was gathering near the old town hall, right on the main street route. It was bait tailored for Hammer's greed and desire for a decisive victory. Hammer took it. He was furious about the disruptions, the humiliation. He wanted a public example, a brutal display of his power that would cow the town and expose the old man and his handful of allies. The idea of also seizing weapons was an added bonus. He assembled his main force, a significant number of vultures, roaring through Elm Creek on their bikes, heading straight for the main street. They were loud, arrogant, and utterly blind to the traps being laid. The air in Elm Creek crackled with tension. The townspeople knew something big was happening. They locked their doors, watching from windows, their hearts pounding. Arthur and his allies were in position, hidden, waiting. The bait was set. The steel vultures rode into the heart of the town, straight into the jaws of the trap Arthur had designed. This was it. The climax. The roar of engines echoed down the main street as the steel vulture streamed in, Hammer at the front, a triumphant sneer on his face. This was their territory, their show of force. They dismounted, fanning out, ready to spread terror. Then, the world shifted. From hidden positions in the buildings lining the street, Arthur's allies struck. It wasn't a hail of bullets, but calculated, disorienting attacks. Flashbangs erupted, temporarily blinding the lead vultures. Caltrops scattered across the street brought several bikes crashing down. Smoke canisters deployed from alleyways created instant confusion. Billy, using a modified pneumatic tool from Frank's garage, shot disabling rounds, non-lethal, but enough to disable limbs or vehicles, from a rooftop. Sarah's jamming equipment flared, turning their comms into static. The vultures, expecting cowering civilians, found themselves in chaos. Arthur, moving with a speed that belied his age, emerged from a hidden doorway, engaging the nearest bikers not with brute force, but with fluid, efficient martial arts. Joint locks, pressure points, swift takedowns. He moved through the startled ranks like a phantom, neutralizing threats before they could even fully react. Each movement was economical, devastatingly effective. Hammer roared in frustration and rage, trying to rally his men. Find them. Kill them all. But Arthur's allies were everywhere, then nowhere. Tom's group used their knowledge of the town's layout to hit and fade, harassing the vultures from multiple angles. Frank and his team targeted the parked bikes, rendering them immobile with quick, precise damage. The vultures found themselves trapped, disoriented, their numbers and powers suddenly meaningless in the face of coordinated, intelligent resistance. Hammer finally spotted Arthur, systematically taking down his men near the town hall. Recognition, and utter fury, contorted his face. "You," he screamed, pulling a large combat knife. He charged, abandoning his men, focused solely on the old man who had dared humiliate him. Arthur turned to face him, his expression calm. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need one. As Hammer lunged, Arthur moved. It wasn't a dance, but a brutal, efficient science. He deflected the knife thrust with a forearm, absorbing the impact, then used Hammer's momentum against him. A quick pivot, a strike to the knee that sent Hammer staggering, then a lightning-fast series of strikes to the body, precise and crippling. Hammer, for all his size and muscle, was outmatched, his wild swings useless against Arthur's controlled movements. Arthur didn't just fight, he dismantled. He used Hammer's arrogance and lack of discipline against him. He ended the fight swiftly, not with a final blow, but with a technique that left Hammer screaming, his dominant arm incapacitated, his knife clattering away. Arthur stood over him, breathing steadily, the battle-hardened warrior fully present now. With their leader defeated and most of their bikes disabled or their riders incapacitated by Arthur's allies, the remaining vultures broke. The show of force had become a rout. They scrambled, trying to escape the trap, leaving their fallen comrades behind. Just then, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Not Sheriff Hayes, but county deputies and state police cruisers. Arthur's allies had made sure the chaos on Main Street was loud enough, visible enough, and that anonymous calls directing outside law enforcement were made. The corrupt local protection wasn't enough to cover up this level of public spectacle. Deputies swarmed the street, securing the area. Stunned, defeated vultures were cuffed. Medics moved in to tend to the injured, mostly vultures incapacitated by Arthur's non-lethal, but highly effective, techniques. Sheriff Hayes arrived, looking flustered and pale. He saw the scene, the destroyed bikes, his town street a mess, and Arthur standing calmly over the defeated Hammer, surrounded by a small group of local residents who clearly had a hand in this. Hayes knew his complicity was about to be exposed. Then, a moment that cut through the chaos. As the highest-ranking state police officer, a captain, stepped out of his car, his eyes swept across the scene. He saw the defeated vultures, the townspeople emerging from their homes with hesitant hope, and finally, he saw Arthur. The captain stopped dead. He stared at Arthur for a long moment, a look of disbelief and then profound respect dawning on his face. Slowly, deliberately, the state police captain snapped to attention and delivered a crisp, sharp salute. Arthur, the quiet old man, the unassuming figure from the diner, returned the salute with quiet dignity. The captain knew. He knew exactly who Arthur was, or at least, who he had been. The quiet legend. The revelation hung in the air. This wasn't just a local hero, this was a ghost from a different, more dangerous world, returned to set things right. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. State police took charge, bypassing Sheriff Hayes, who was soon questioned intensely and later suspended. The defeated steel vultures were processed, their operation dismantled. Evidence found at the mill, including the caches Arthur's allies had identified, confirmed the scale of their criminal enterprise: drugs, illegal weapons trafficking, extortion on a regional level. Hammer and his lieutenants were going away for a very long time. The townspeople emerged fully now, cheering, some crying with relief. Martha rushed forward, hugging Arthur fiercely. Billy, Frank, Sarah, Tom, and the others gathered around him, exhausted but triumphant. They had done it. They had taken back their town. Later, sitting back in his usual booth at the diner, the broken window already boarded up with promises of swift repair, Arthur reflected. He watched Martha serving coffee with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. He saw Billy and Tom helping clean up the debris outside. The fear was gone, replaced by a fragile, but growing, sense of community and empowerment. He had wanted peace. He had found conflict instead. But in that conflict, he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought was lost forever, not just the warrior, but the protector. He had led a small group of ordinary people to do something extraordinary. He had reminded a town, and perhaps himself, that true strength wasn't in intimidation and cruelty, but in courage, unity, and standing up for what was right. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned, in moments like these. The memory of the state police captain's salute lingered. It was a recognition of a different life, a different kind of service. He hadn't sought glory, only quiet anonymity. But perhaps anonymity wasn't an option when injustice came knocking. His hands, still steady, reached for his coffee mug. The scars beneath the skin felt less like burdens and more like reminders of a purpose that, it seemed, was still a part of him. Elm Creek began to heal. The boards on the windows were replaced with new glass. The spray paint was scrubbed away. Without the vultures preying on them, businesses started to recover. The sense of fear was replaced by a quiet determination. The townspeople looked out for each other more, a bond forged in shared hardship and victory. Arthur didn't fade back into complete obscurity. He wasn't leading patrols or giving speeches, but he was no longer just the quiet old man. He was Arthur, the man who had stood up, the one who had led the charge. He became a respected figure, sought out for quiet advice. Billy, Frank, Sarah, and Tom remained close, their bond unbreakable. Billy even started helping out at the diner, offering Martha a hand. Sheriff Hayes was replaced by a new, honest sheriff, likely influenced by the state police captain who knew Arthur's past. The corruption was rooted out. Elm Creek wasn't perfect, but it was theirs again, free from the shadow of the steel vultures. Arthur continued his routine, coffee at the diner, watching the town. But now, when people looked at him, they didn't just see an old man. They saw the quiet strength, the unwavering resolve, the legacy of a life lived with purpose, now rededicated to protecting the peace he had fought so hard to find, and ultimately, to preserve for others. His desire for peace remained, but he now understood it wasn't a passive state. It was something you had to be willing to fight for, again and again, with quiet courage and the strength found in unity. The story of the day the quiet old man stood up became a legend in Elm Creek, a reminder that the most dangerous people are often the ones you least expect. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.